And now we are ready for a fireside chat. I'm sure this segment will live up to its name. It is going to be a fiery session indeed. We have the privilege of hosting the Honorable Minister of IT and Digital Services of Tamil Nadu. In order to introduce and invite our guest of honor, can we have on stage Ms. Anisha Cherian, the immediate past president of TiE Kerala, the founder and MD of Chemmanur Academy and Systems Private Limited. Welcome, Madam Anisha. The Honorable Minister of Information Technology and Digital Services, Tamil Nadu, Dr. Palanivel Thiaga Rajan. Someone who brings a wealth of experience from the corporate to the minister, unleashing the Kerala potential, all set to listen to insights from the man himself.
Let me do my duty by giving you a brief introduction to Dr. Palanivel Thiaga Rajan, Honorable Minister of IT and Digital Services, Government of Tamil Nadu. MIT topper to investment banking to politics. PhD from State University of New York. MBA Finance from MIT. He has traveled to 60 plus countries due to his global corporate career and due to his deep curiosity. Previously, Minister of Finance and Human Resource, Government of Tamil Nadu. He has a rich legacy of a political family. He represents the fourth generation of his family's engagement in the Dravidian movement. I'd like to mention a few statements of his talks on videos which I've been watching over the last 1 or 2 days. He calls himself a change agent and wants to leave the system better than he found it. And for transformative change, he says you need political will and administrative skill. He says the highest threat to democracy is the rising inequality around the world. He's a rationalist and also a believer and wants to create systems that are not personality-driven. He says that in the opposition, it's your day job to rant and rave at the system, but when you are in the government, you have to make a choice which is the greater good and act. I also need to mention that last year, Dr. Thiaga Rajan, as Finance Minister, was invited as chief guest for TiE Kerala Awards, and he did not accept our usual hospitalities from TiE. He paid for his own tickets. He did his own accommodation booking. There was no pickup from airport. And then later I realized that he does this everywhere. I wish all our politicians learn from that. I'm hoping to, pick his brilliant mind for the benefit of Kerala. So we shall start now. Welcome to Kerala, Thiaga Rajan.
Thank you for having me.
So I've got a few questions. Let me start off by saying that Tamil Nadu has grown from USD 80 billion to 300 plus billion in the last 8 years. And, as per the information that I have, it equals to Dubai, Singapore, Hong Kong economy. What do you think are the reasons, the main factors that led to this phenomenal growth? Why is Tamil Nadu the second richest state, or the second largest economy in India, or the #1 investment destination in India?
Well, first I should add some caveats, right, given the topic you have. As ministers, as politicians, as policymakers, we struggle to do the job that we are elected to do ourselves, right, which is our own government, our own constituencies. So I was a bit daunted by the heading that I would have some unique insight into Kerala. So let me first caveat that I'm not qualified enough to say a lot of things about Kerala. I don't have enough depth. But I think some things are common, and to the extent that they are either replicable or adaptable, maybe there's some value. So let me look at it from that perspective. First thing I would say is that we should really take these numbers with some kind of trepidation, right? Because when we say things like X dollars this year and Y dollars that year, already we are talking in terms of a currency that is not relevant to the lives of most people in our country, right?
Okay.
So when we start setting these goals, the first thing we should worry about, and surprisingly, the man who has the person who happens to be a man who has the greatest resonance with me on this subject is Mr. Subramanian Swamy, right? So he said, if we're going to set goals, the realistic goal, because our ambition is to improve the quality of life. So either if we're going to set goals or we're going to make measurements, it should be in inflation adjusted per capita rupees. Then you have taken into effect the population growth, you have taken into effect inflation, and now if you say I was X and I am Y or 1.5X or 2X, it means there's a very high likelihood that some improvement in the quality of life of citizens happened. Now when it goes from something like 80 to 300, it could have multiple variables in there. It could be a function of the US dollar to Indian rupee exchange. It could be a function of increasing population or increasing working age population, and therefore the actual per capita productivity or impact has not moved a lot. So I don't want to get into, it could be just inflation, it could be, so I don't want to get into the nuances, but I believe there are some things we do right in Tamil Nadu. And one of them, probably the most important of them, is that we have a relatively inclusive and a relatively equitable society. And by inclusive, I mean educational opportunities, job opportunities, starting with gender neutrality, relative gender neutrality. We have so many statistics to show that the percentage of women working in manufacturing or running businesses or number of women-owned enterprises, all these are much higher in Tamil Nadu per the population or per the economy than most states. And community-wise, region-wise, we try to make sure everybody participates in this. Because of that, we have a relatively low, not as great as Kerala, but much better than other large economies like Maharashtra or Gujarat, relatively low Gini coefficient, which means that we have a relatively high per capita consumption base. People are actually participating in the development by buying more goods or consuming more calories or whatever it is. So I think if we have this virtuous cycle that we have a relatively large population, relatively good education, most of them participate in the system some way or the other, and then we get this multiplier effect because we make sure that nobody's left behind through a lot of schemes, social schemes, and government support. So that would probably be the 3 or 4 variables. Of course, it then helps that you can attract investment because of that. We're a big manufacturing center. We used to be bigger as a percentage of the country. Now we're not so much. We're a big automobile center. We're a relatively big IT and tech sector center. We're relatively big in education and R&D. So these are the growth industries where we can actually get the benefit economically.
I heard that 40% of women in the manufacturing sector, they are working in Tamil Nadu. Is that?
Yeah, that was an amazing statistic. I think it's something like 43% of all women employed in the formal manufacturing sector. That means that they're getting a, EPF contribution accredited to their account. That is actually quite shocking to me because Tamil Nadu is about 6% of the population of the country. And if 43% of all women working in the entire manufacturing sector of India are in Tamil Nadu, then it says 2 or 3 things. First, it says that we have this luxury, as I said, of participation of women in education, in employment, in the economy, and that's a huge boon for us and drives the GDP. The second is that they are educated and qualified enough, and the social norms are such that they are able to come out and enter into the workforce. The third, and really the bulk of this employment comes out of probably electronics assembly, leather and non-leather footwear, and textile and apparel. That's probably where the bulk of the women employment, because like Foxconn and all that is 100% women, right? Thousands and thousands of workers, all women. Same way, non-leather footwear, thousands of workers, all women. So these industries find it conducive. So you have to have both to work, right? One, there must be the labor pool. It must be available and interested and capable of joining the workforce, but it also must be the kinds of industries that are able to create these kinds of jobs find a conducive environment in Tamil Nadu. And so I think the combination of these two, but it's an amazing statistic, and we're very happy with it. We want to keep it, we don't want that, not at the expense of other states, but we want to keep a high proportion of women, and we want more and more women entering the formal economy in as many ways as possible, either as industrial employees or as entrepreneurs, or some other path that's a hybrid.
Tamil Nadu also has the highest number of women-owned enterprises, close to 1 million. I'm not sure of the statistics, but that is what I read. What did the government of Tamil Nadu do differently to make this happen? Kerala has more than 35% of its educated and skilled women doing unpaid work. How do we bring them out to initiate entrepreneurial ventures? Would you have some ideas on that?
I think there's at least 3 different issues there, so I don't know how to put them all together. Let me decompose the question. I think the first question is, how do you get women engaged in, how do you facilitate women-owned enterprises?
Yes.
And I think that we have incentive schemes, we have allocations, we have quotas, but most importantly, I would say that the single statistic that will drive all of this is somewhere north of 87% of all girls at the age of 18 are graduating high school. And that probably is the feeder into everything. We are actually ensuring that women are educated. Kerala does a good job, so I'm not saying relatively, but I'm saying for us that is the building block in absolute terms, because now we have women who have the basic education who can go out and do things, whether it's run a small business or get employed. The second thing is we give incentives. We allocate some proportion of contracts to women. We do reservations in government work. We do reservations a lot in hiring, and then many of them leave the job and go on to do entrepreneurship through their access. We have a separate Women Development Corporation of Tamil Nadu, where we give specialized training and try to make sure they have equitable access. So this is all one path. The second path is entrepreneurship per se can be facilitated by the government by kind of easing the bureaucracy and the red tape and the bottlenecks and the rent seeking and all the negatives that come out of these things, by trying to have a relatively level playing field rather than through who you know and insider connections and stuff like that, and by encouraging people to take risks and not having a social stigma or a deep personal cost for failure. And I think, especially in the US, if you look, that is one of the reasons I think failure is actually celebrated. You have tried something too far and you failed, that's okay. Many companies want to hire you if you're a failed startup or an entrepreneur, right? Now it comes to women, I would say you have to create an ecosystem that makes it easier for women to engage in the formal economy, whether that's employment, whether that's entrepreneurship, whether that's registering companies, whether that's filing regulatory, paperwork and so forth. And that is broader the way society functions, right? Whether we like it or not, women are the primary caregivers. The societal norms are not changing that fast. So, just little things. Since our government came, we initiated free bus transportation for anybody who wants to go to work or run their small shop or whatever. They don't have to rely on somebody else to give them transportation or own a two-wheeler or whatever. We give free bus transportation in many of the major cities and many of the routes. Last year, we started a free breakfast program. So we actually relieved the burden of providing breakfast to the elementary school children from the parents, from the mother, obviously, most of the cases. And the school supplies breakfast. And I would say, rupee for rupee, that is probably the single most cost-effective, impactful scheme that I signed off on in my 2 years in the finance ministry. But
that's fantastic.
Yeah, it has to start even before that. Like if you look at my constituency, I use my constituency development funds very methodically and very deep analysis. I have built, I think, 18 or 19 childcare centers, daycare centers in my constituency in 7 years. So that means at least 2 a year, 3 a year I'm doing. And that frees up women to be able to go and do other things. So you have to actually create that ecosystem, because it's a very gender role-based society. And if you don't free them up, they're going to have to do the job. It's not a lot of fathers who are sitting at home and taking care of those things. Yeah.
So basically the government took on that role and it made a difference.
Yeah, I mean, we try, right? Marginally, I'm not sure.
No, but still Tamil Nadu has the highest number of women-owned enterprises in India. So I think, you do deserve a round of applause for that.
Many people deserve the credit for it, yeah.
TiE Kerala has selected 5 sectors of growth. So that is education, R&D, assisted living, health and wellness, and agriculture. What do you think is Kerala's biggest strength, and which growth sectors do you think Kerala needs to focus on in the next 10 years?
I think for anybody, your human resources are your greatest strength. And I think that's particularly true of India, and I think it's particularly true of India today. I've been around giving talks and attending seminars all over the world in the last couple of weeks, maybe 3-4 weeks. And one of the things I noticed was just how many Indians were everywhere. Right? I used to be an expat. I used to live in the US for 20 years and then in other parts of the world for 5-10 years. So I've seen this transition from the 1980s when I went as a grad student, and it was rare to see Indians in certain parts of the United States, to now, in like remote Europe or deep Australia, to seeing. And I think then I came back and started doing some reading and looking at the statistics, and it's actually remarkable. I think roughly 1 in 6 human beings in the world today is Indian, right? Just gross, or more, yeah. And then you start kind of scaling that to take out the aging countries like Japan and Western Europe and all that. Then you say of the working age or likely to be working age in the next 18-20 years, then India is probably more like 1 in 5, right, or 1 in 4. And then you say those that have a basic education or are on track to get a basic education, now the ratio becomes alarming. It's like 25% of the world's workforce for the next 20 years is going to be coming from India. It brings a lot of responsibility. You got to find a way to get them employed, and you got to figure out a way to integrate them into the global economy where there's a huge shortage of labor. So those are things we're working on, at least in my own way. I can give you an example later. But really, it has to be about the people, and it has to be about the people in a way that we start with. If you raise the weighted average productivity of your population, then your quality of life will improve. You're in a global economy. You have to find a way to raise the weighted average productivity of your population. Obviously, it helps a lot if everybody is engaged. If half are not engaged, or if 35% are at home doing unpaid work, already your average is going to be affected by that. So the first thing you can do is try to make sure everybody is engaged and increase their ability to compete for relatively higher paid jobs through skill development, through training, through education, now starting at the elementary school for the generation that will become the workforce 15 or 20 years from now. But the other thing I would say for Kerala, at least from an outside perspective, is the kind of possibilities in travel and tourism and hospitality is just unlimited, right? Like the whole world sees Kerala as one of the most attractive tourist destinations. And though I can see some development, there's still a lot of scope for progress, right? Like travel within Kerala is not that easy. The road network is not as good as Tamil Nadu's, let's say, just as a basic comparison. So I think there's a lot of things that can be done to leverage your natural beauty, your ecosystem to get that. The third thing I would say is Kerala already excels in certain parts of healthcare. I was trying to get some agreements signed recently, and I therefore came to know that the Northern Territory state of Australia and the state of Kerala have now signed an agreement for the provision of healthcare workers and skilled nursing and all that, where there's a huge shortage there. and there's, really good culture and training here. So, so some of this will require either permanent or temporary human resource exports, because as you know, the Kerala economy is so driven by remittances, right?
Yes.
You're already probably the most extended diaspora all over the world,
Yes.
with great amounts of remittances coming back, and that can get better and better. Also, I would say things like spices and, the kind of value added, low yield, high value products, not like us, not like rice and coconuts, but the peppers and the spices and stuff like that.
Resins,
Yeah, and I think those things, clearly you have an advantage. I'm not a great believer in the notion that you can create manufacturing powerhouses just because you decide to do so. It is a very competitive global economy. I was in a event yesterday in Chennai with Thiru Narayanamurthy, the founder of Infosys, and he had a view. I didn't argue with him on the stage, he's too old, but he had a view on the dais that Raghuram Rajan's view, which I ascribe to and which I think is more realistic, that the future is, at least in the short term, has to be services driven, because the odds that we can become a globally competitive manufacturing power in the near term is relatively low, particularly in high value add products. And for low value add products, automation is going to take away all human workload anyway. But he had a different view. He said services can never be a substitute. We should aim to be big manufacturers and all that. I'm not sure it can be done. I don't know. My own view, 50% of the goods, if we walk out on the street and try to buy in Kochi today, are coming from China. Manufactured goods, right? At least.
But Kerala is tuned into services. I mean, that is one area which
so
we can
that's what I'm
actually
saying. So that's where I think the future is in the short term, at least.
Okay. Now I'm just going to take a different track. In multiple talks, you've mentioned that you'd like to leave the system better than you found it. Now, if you were an advisor to the government of Kerala, mention 3 transformative changes you would recommend for Kerala to improve its entrepreneurial ecosystem.
No, I shouldn't be in the business of giving advice to other people unsolicited. Let me try to answer in a way that is not Kerala specific. Let me go back a bit to the philosophy of things. Why is change so important, right? And I think basically, why don't I touch that first and then I'll come back to this. I think the reason I believe change is so important is that the circumstances, the environment, the global connectivity, so many variables are changing beyond your control that if you are a policy maker or an administrator or an executive in a company or some kind of strategic level decision maker, it is your job to make sure that you are changing to adapt to the variables that are changing beyond your control, right? And if you're not doing that, you're going to get run over, right? Because the change is happening independent of you. So when I say I want to improve the system, partly it's because even if you started with a perfect system, surely it will need changing in 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, something. But in most cases, systems A are not perfect, and B, they go in the wrong direction, right? The general progression of the world is towards greater entropy, greater problems, greater complexity, and if we're not careful, weaker democracy, greater authoritarianism, these kinds of things. So in that sense, I think let's take the job of a minister or the job of a finance minister or the job of a government. What the Constitution envisioned our roles to be and what we do now are profoundly different. Something because we just didn't pay enough attention. Sometimes because corruption and malfeasance and rent seeking and other things came in the way. Sometimes because of the preferences of individuals or too much power in too few hands. But whatever the variable is, even the basic functioning of government is not really where an ideal democracy or ideal constitutional vision would say that you're doing a great job. Now you say, if that is the basis and the reason for change, then you say for entrepreneurs, either you should already find that the culture is so encouraging and the system is so conducive that whoever wants to start a business can do so without any hurdles, or if not, then you have very clear ways of trying to improve the system. You say, between intent and setting up a business with all the required paperwork and your GST number and your employer number and your labor filings, how long does it take? Let's say right now it takes 180 days. Okay, my ambition is in the next 6 months I should try and bring that down to 100 days. In the next 2 years I should bring, so you can have very concrete goals rather than philosophically try to do that. The second thing I would say is in funding. In a lot of cases, entrepreneurs are not able to access funding because it's a very inefficient capital market in India. There's not, it's broken in many ways. I don't want to get into the details. But and I know that it's not that easy to get funding for startups or for unsecured loans for individuals or business credit risk, right? There's not risk appetite for business credit. So governments can facilitate a lot of that. And in fact, even in the government of India, they're trying to do it by writing loan guarantees, by removing some of the onerous KYC constraints through government validation, by providing subsidies. In the case of Tamil Nadu, in the last 2-3 years, we have set up government venture capital funds, some at the broader audience with outside funding. We set up an emerging sector seed fund in an alternate asset manager we have called TNIFMC. I used to chair that. And then we have targeted funds for women, for Dalits. We have funds that, 10 crore, 20 crore, 30 crore, which will invest up to 30 lakh, 50 lakh in each company. So you can try and bridge some of that gap in funding, either in equity stakes by the government itself or in credit guarantees that make it easier for the banks to lend.
Okay.
And you can create that kind of environment. Now, one of the great luxuries we have, I'm not sure what the number is for Kerala, but if you take Tamil Nadu, the credit to deposit ratio is greater than 100%. That means there are more loans given in Tamil Nadu by the banks than there are deposits taken from the citizens. Obviously, the money goes where the opportunity is.
Yes.
You flip that and say, let's say you go to Uttar Pradesh, and the ratio is only about 50%. So it's already a poor state, relatively per capita. There's already few deposits per capita, and even those deposits are not being lent within Uttar Pradesh. They're taken out to other places like Tamil Nadu, right? So if you create the right kind of ecosystem, you should be able to move that ratio also towards your favor. And if you don't have a stable kind of society, then nobody wants to take risk. And then the notion of entrepreneurship, the business model already has a lot of risk.
Yes.
Now, if you also have social unrest or other kind of, risks in terms of daily life and operation, now it's not it's not an environment that anybody wants to actually start a new enterprise in, right? Yeah.
You can definitely be candid. Okay, again, I think we have a few more minutes. Now let's imagine that, you get the opportunity to be the Prime Minister of India. What would be the 3 top transformative changes you would initiate? I would love to ask you this question. What are the 3 things right the center did and what are the 3 things wrong the center did? But, I leave it to you.
No, let's stick with this question. It's easier. I would say the first thing is to strengthen the norms of democracy and go back to the vision of the Constitution, right? The more you have independent voices, independent institutions, the more you have freedom of debate, the more you have a realistic expectation that nobody is that smart, nobody is that brilliant that they know the answers because they say so, and that everything needs to be taken through a debate process or through the parliament. And I won't blame only this government. I'll say the notion of the legislature as a pillar of democracy has already been profoundly eroded. We are only in namesake a parliamentary democracy. Whichever party wins the majority, effectively controls the government, and I don't see that many independent MLAs getting elected, at least places like Tamil Nadu. And whoever has the majority MLAs can pass whatever legislation they want. There's the notion of, because once you have anti-defection, the whip, all these things, there's not really that much room for representatives to be more concerned about their constituents than about their party or their party leadership. So we have a system that is supposed to function one way, but the checks and balances are all gone. And so if you can find a way to actually bring back the checks and balances and create a system that functions with the design of producing optimal outcomes, then I think that'll be a really good outcome. Second thing I would say is that the devolution of power is a must. No other country in the world has this much decision making coming out of one federal or union kind of authority, right? And what is shocking to me, like absolutely shocking to me, I was able to phrase the question exactly in a debate recently. I said, name me one country in the world where the kindergarten syllabus is set by the government that manages or is supposed to manage 1.4 billion people. Anywhere in the world. If it's China, if it's America, if it's Switzerland, if it's UK, school syllabuses are set by the school boards in that district, in that city, in that village, in that town, right? Maybe in that state. Here we have one from there. So if you try to do 100% decision making with one size fits all in a country that is as diverse as ours, the odds that you can ever succeed is exactly zero, right? So now the question is, how bad will it fail? How long will it take before the failure becomes intolerable? The third thing I would say is, have consistency of policy. Either you want to be self-reliant for everything. In that case, don't expect to get the international capital and the international trade and the international markets open to you. Or realize that India is a profoundly capital-constrained country and a huge pool of resources, and the more you integrate into the global economy, the better off you are. So you can't be on at the same time Atmanirbhar when it comes to whatever I need, but I want to be able to export and send my people to you because there's the opportunity for that also, right? So consistency of policy across international relations, foreign trade, the currency, all of that in a way that makes you better partners, more predictable, more reliable, and more desirable as counterparties. Yeah.
Okay. Can we play that video? We'll close the session with that video.
Every time I try to do something and somebody tells me, this is not corporate, this is politics. And I say, nowhere in politics does it say that I have to be stupid, right? There's no requirement. I can still do intelligent things. That doesn't make it corporate. It's much harder having your own personality when you're in government. Right? When you're in opposition, it's your day job to rant and rave at the system. When you're in government, you have to figure out which is the greater good. Now that's a very slippery slope, right? Because you could easily be lulled into doing nothing.
Play that clip that sums you up totally. Mr. Thiaga Rajan, thank you very much. Really appreciate the time.
Thank you very much.